Hello and welcome to my channel. In this one I'm going to show you this drawing of a poison dart frog. It's a very colorful drawing, but this is actually the first video in which I'm using oil pastels, so I have a number of topics to cover. First I'm going to show you which ones I used. I actually bought these from that site called Temu, and I have no idea. It's a 48 oil pastel set, and I have no idea how the name is pronounced. It says Gesso or something like that. Anyway, I read the reviews for them and they were pretty good, and they said that they were very creamy and soft, and they compared them to the Mungio, which I heard was a very well-known brand of oil pastels. Now I have no idea about how good the Mungio are, or whether these are actually similar to Mungio ones. I just know that they got decent reviews, and I decided to buy them because they're very cheap and they appear to be of decent quality. As for the results, you will be the judge. I have to warn you that I'm a beginner with this particular medium. I've used all other types of dry media, all other types of pencils and pastels, but I've never worked with oil pastels. Now, this was not really my first attempt to try this medium. I've done a couple of unsuccessful drawings or bad drawings with these. And these are the Faber-Castell oil pastels. I was very disappointed with these because, and later I read some really nasty reviews about them, but they're really hard, really dry, and they kind of felt almost like you were trying to draw with plastic. So, you know, I don't mean to say bad things about Faber-Castell, because they're one of my favorite brands when it comes to colored pencils, graphite pencils, and many other things. They make really good stuff, but here just I couldn't do anything with them. These, on the other hand, performed pretty well, and I was able to do this drawing, and we're going to talk a little bit about the drawing process, about how it felt, what are some of the shortcomings of the medium, or at least some of the difficulties I encountered, etc. So please let me know what you think in the comments. I want to know your opinion about the medium, the brands you use, and my technique, because like I said, I'm a beginner with this medium, so I don't really know if I applied them correctly. I did just try to follow the basic principles that I know, because I have experience in other media, and to do the best that I can. Anyway, let's get on to the drawing process of this colorful frog. So as you can see, I already started working on the background here using a combination of black and a little bit of darker greens. I wanted my background to be mostly very dark. First I'm going to say a few words about the paper and the reference, and then we're going to talk about some of my impressions and my experience when working with these oil pastels. So the paper I'm working on is the UART 800 sanded paper. It is the same paper that I use for many of my colored pencil drawings as well as pastel drawings. It's a textured paper that feels like sandpaper, like a fine sandpaper. Alright, so as for the reference is going to be in the description, but I didn't really like the background in my reference, so I decided to create a different type of background where it would be mostly dark with just a few suggestions of slightly lighter greenish shapes, and then the frog would be sitting on a green leaf. So I decided to change the scene, change the setting a little bit, because I thought that this tropical kind of frog would go better with a green background. Anyway, as you can see, I started working on this background, and I'm blending it with my fingers. I'm blending the pastels with my fingers, and it's working. And now I'm moving in with some lighter colors, and I'm doing this very tentatively and very carefully because I've already found out the hard way that these are actually kind of messy to work with, and it's easy for these lighter colors to get muddied with the by the darker layers, by the darker colors, so I have to be careful around the edges. I'm also going to test out how well these can be layered on top of one another in terms of putting lighter colors on top of the darker colors, but we'll get to that eventually. Now let me say another thing. So like I said, I'm working on the UART 800 paper now, but I actually tested this on a piece of regular paper, like a regular drawing paper, and I came to a conclusion that it's better that with these pastels, that it's better to use a toothy paper, because the paper I tried was a little bit more on the smoother side, and I had some trouble layering. I had some weird effects where when I would try to put more pastel, it was almost as if some of the layer underneath were coming off or something. I'm not really sure what was happening, but I didn't experience that problem once I switched to this textured paper. So the first thing I've learned, and the first thing that I can recommend for those who want to try oil pastels, is to try paper that has more tooth, especially a sanded paper like I'm using now. So that's one thing. Alright, the other thing that I've learned, like I said, was there you go, I managed to put a small highlight there with a white pastel on top of the orange. So that's good, that's kind of promising. It's just a tiny detail, but it's very useful to know that I'm actually able to go from dark to light. It's not a very clean mark, I have to say, but I didn't need it to be clean. So obviously this type of medium, these oil pastels, they are not really great for drawings which require a lot of precision, fine details and textures, or at least that's the impression I'm getting. But they can be layered on top of one another, and you can work from light to dark as well as from dark to light. So this is very useful to know. This is very good for me because it will make my job a lot easier, and it will also make maybe correcting some of the mistakes a little bit easier, even though I have to tell you they are kind of messy, and the medium looks to me like it's less forgiving than soft pastels. Here around the edges I had to do some blending with a tortillon, or with a blending stump rather, because I needed something with a tiny tip. I didn't want to go in with my finger because I wouldn't be able to create a nice clean edge. So with this I was able to create a clean edge, and I just didn't want to touch that with my finger, because if I try to touch it with my finger, you can see that I'm causing a little bit of a mess, a little bit of muddying. Now I'm lucky that this is a shadow area here, because the eyes are kind of bulging out and there's a little bit of shadow at the bottom there of that shape. So I was going to make that a little bit darker anyway, but you can see that this part of the drawing picked up a tiny bit of that darker pigment, and it was a little bit difficult to dislodge it. And when I layered on top of it, I made it a bit lighter, but it's not exactly perfect. So I'm learning the limitations of this medium. Anyway, this frog has really some incredible colors, and I think I read somewhere that it's also called the blue jeans frog, because the legs are covered with this blue color, whereas most of the body is kind of orangey or reddish orange. And I'm using this dark blue pastel for one of the hind legs here. So as you can see, the colors are super vibrant, very strong colors. The coverage is great, and they fill in the tooth very, very quickly. I'm back to using the blending stump to go around the edges to make sure that I'm able to work with precision. So blending stumps also work, apparently. Now, to emphasize this edge or contrast between the leg and the background, I put a little bit of light blue, which worked apparently. And now I'm going to continue working with some orangey tones. So, like I said, the frog's body is mostly of this orangey color, and some parts of it are a little bit lighter than others. The orange I'm going to use for the most part is something like a cadmium orange. I don't really know the exact names or the designations. These are Chinese oil pastels. It's a Chinese brand. I can't really understand anything that's written there. Like I said, the name is GSO apparently, or I don't know how it's pronounced, doesn't really matter. I'm putting in a little bit of ochre in the background there because I wanted some yellowish tones in the background, just so that it's a little bit more interesting. And so far so good. I think I've discovered that they can be blended, they can be layered, and I can blend them both using my finger and some other blending tools. And more importantly, they are very, very creamy. They feel like lipstick. Not that I ever used lipstick on myself, obviously, but I know how it feels. And they are very vibrant, very strong colors. So in a way they are similar to soft pastels, because soft pastels will also give you very vibrant colors, but unlike soft pastels, these have oil in them. They have some kind of a binder, which means that they are stickier, and which means that it will be a bit more difficult to smudge them and to ruin them, I suppose. It would take a little bit more pressure and a little bit more determination if you want to destroy an oil pastel drawing in comparison to the soft pastel drawing, because the soft pastel drawing, when it's not fixed, it's like the wings of a butterfly, very, very delicate. This is a little bit more permanent. Now, I read about these. I'm going to draw the leaf now. I'm going to use one of the mid-tone greens, let's say. So I read about these, and I learned that they never fully dry, but they do harden a little bit when you leave them to dry, so they won't always be quite as sticky. So that's a good thing. And there are also fixatives for them, so I'm going to be looking more into that, into those options when it comes to fixing, and because I like to fix my drawings. I don't like when they're unfixed, and if these can be fixed more easily than the soft pastels, then that is definitely an advantage of this medium in comparison to the pastels, soft pastels, and the pastel pencils, which are chalky and have virtually no binder in them. So unlike those, these kind of stick to the surface of the paper. But they still can be moved around, they still can be blended fairly easily. And now, another thing that I was kind of wondering while I was doing this was whether I should just cake them on, meaning whether I should just not worry about the thickness of layers and just put more and more on top. And I found that maybe that's not the greatest idea, and sometimes I can just push a little bit harder and try to spread the material a little bit thinner, and I still get the same vibrant color, and I cover the background color of the paper, while at the same time I filled in less of the tooth of the paper, and that gives me more opportunity to put new layers on top, especially when it comes to drawing cleaner marks, because you can always put more layers on top because they're kind of sticky. Here I kind of experimented with a pointed stick to see if I can draw some veins on that leaf, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So as you can see, I put down most of the colors that I'm going to use. I have a little bit of that green for the leaf. I have some of the main colors that I'm going to use on the frog, and I'm just going to keep working and keep working out the details, especially on the main subject now, on the frog. So far I'd say these oil pastels, I'm quite satisfied with them. They turned out to be a lot messier than I expected, but you know, whenever you try a new medium, whenever you try something new, it's going to be a little bit clumsy, it's going to be a little bit messy. That's just the way it is in life. But I think I'm coping pretty well. I think this is turning out even maybe a little bit better than I expected in some ways. I'm drawing some of these spots or darker marks on the frog's body, on the hind legs, because when I look at those blue legs, it either looks like they're of darker color with some lighter blue spots, or they're of lighter blue color with some darker spots. I don't really know which of these two is the case, but I'll just try to imitate it as best as I can. So as you can see, I laid down the darker colors first, and now it's time to put in some slightly lighter colors. I'm going to put down some lighter blue. So as you can see, I don't know if it's the paper or the pastels, but I am able to put some lighter marks on top. Now the white, because the frog's skin is kind of shiny and smooth. So I was able to put in some lighter marks, not necessarily as opaque as I was hoping, or not necessarily as opaque, but not necessarily as clean or with a clean edge as I was hoping, but still for a drawing that's going to be a little bit on the impressionistic side rather than the photorealistic side, this is not bad at all, I think. So once again, in terms of the reference, I picked a nice photo of one of those poison frogs, one of those poison dart frogs. They come in all kinds of colors, and this one, the blue jeans frog, I especially like the combination of colors, the orange and blue. And I just decided to create a different background. I hope that you will like my background, and I hope that you'll agree that my background is better than the background in the reference, which I didn't really like. Anyway, this middle part of the frog's body here is kind of a little bit lighter in color because it's more exposed to the light source, and there's going to be some highlights there as well, but I'm going to get to that later. There's another thing that I forgot to mention, and this is something that I did deliberately actually. In many of these cases, I could have reserved the light space. I could have not covered any area with darker pastel, and just reserved that lighter space for the lighter pastel first. I didn't do that deliberately because I wanted to see how well lighter colors can be put on top of the darker ones. This was very important for me to see, because this is something that you can do with pastels, especially on sanded paper. And this is something that you can also do with colored pencils on sanded paper. On regular paper, you can't really do much with colored pencils, but as for these oil pastels, you can layer lighter colors on top of the darker ones to a certain degree, even on regular drawing paper. But on a paper with more tooth, this is probably even easier. So I picked this UART 800 paper, and so far it has worked pretty well for me. So now you can see I've established some mild contrast between those darker reddish orange parts of the body and those in the middle, which are a little bit lighter and more yellowish orange. Anyway, another thing that I experienced working on this paper with these pastels, which was a little bit unpleasant, was that they wear down the skin on your fingertips a little bit faster than soft pastels for some reason. So you see, this paper, the UART 800, is a sanded paper, so it feels very much like sandpaper when you touch it, but it's a little bit easier on your fingertips than regular sandpaper or from the hardware store. But the problem is that for some reason, when I'm blending these oil pastels, it eventually starts to hurt my fingers. I don't know exactly why what the difference is, but probably the oil pastels are creating more friction, which is damaging my skin a little bit faster than the soft pastels would, which are kind of chalky and easier to move around. So these stick a little bit more and probably create more friction. I'm adding some darker reddish colors here at the bottom. So this is like a dull reddish brown. I want some of this in the shadow parts of the frog's body, because I don't want it to look flat. Vibrant colors are very nice to look at, but the problem is that the animal also needs to be defined in terms of its shape. And if you want to define the shape, you need a range of value and you need contrast in value, which is why I'm adding some of these darker values to those parts of the body which are supposed to be darker. And here behind the eye, because the eye is kind of bulging up and bulging outwards, there's going to be some shadow behind it. Now, occasionally I forget which of my fingers are clean and I cause a little bit of a mess, a little bit of muddying. I should probably use some kind of gloves, or at least have a paper towel to keep wiping my hands so that I will keep my fingers clean. I wanted to say a few more words about the Faber-Castell oil pastels that I mentioned in the intro. But let me just address what I'm doing right now. So the frog appears to have some spots, darker spots, which appear either dark brown or even black. So this orangey, reddish orangey surface of the cat's, or not the cat's, the frog's body is covered with some of these spots, and I want to include those as well. So, I started talking about the Faber-Castell oil pastels. I was very disappointed in them. I couldn't really produce anything I liked. They just didn't layer and blend very well at all, and they just felt way too waxy. Like either there isn't enough pigment in there, or maybe there isn't enough binder in there. I have no idea, but they just don't work. They just don't work. I've actually seen some of the cheap oil pastels or wax-based pastels that my kids use that produce more vibrant colors than those. And I don't know why that is so, but like I said, I was very, very unhappy with them. So maybe I should get back to talking about the drawing process, because I've done a number of things here which I should discuss. So as you can see, I've created this large highlight, that reflective part of the body, and I was able to put in some white pastel there. It turned out pretty good. Some parts of it weren't quite as opaque as I was hoping they would be, but it was still good enough in my opinion. Now for the catchlight in the eye, I was afraid that the black would be too strong and that I wouldn't be able to put that white catchlight on top of it, so I just reserved the white space there. I was, I had to be careful there, so I just worked around it and drew the white detail directly on the paper without any layers underneath. As for the highlights on the body and on the shoulder area, those I put in on top of the orange color, and as I said, it appears to have worked. Some of them could have a slightly cleaner edge, but it looks fine. It's not bad. Another good thing about these pastels is that, the price is obviously one of the best things about them, because they cost around $30. And for $30 you get 48 oil pastels, a very nice range of colors of obviously very decent quality. And in that set you also get 6 white pastels, so they figured that you might need more of the white pastels, so you get more of those. You get 6 of those. I would have wanted to get 6 of the black ones maybe as well, but that's fine. I'm just gonna have to do with what I have. So I'm drawing the rest of the leaf here, and I'm doing that with this lovely green color. And once I do most of the background color there, I'm gonna get into maybe trying to define some of the smaller details on the leaf, and then work out the details on the legs. You may have noticed that I simply skipped over some parts of the drawing process. That's because I simply forgot to turn on the camera, because that happens when you're experimenting with a new medium. I just forgot to turn it on, and I lost some part of the drawing process, but it's not a big deal. I've included all of the most important bits, and you can still see most of the drawing process. You can see how I'm carefully blending around those the frog's fingers or toes or whatever they are, and just making sure that I reserve the lighter space for the legs, even though I could probably get away with layering on top of the green, but you know, sometimes I just want a cleaner color, because when I layer one on top of the other there is some muddying. So when I want to minimize that, I'm just going to leave lighter space. I'm just going to leave a space that's not covered with any pastel, so that I would have plenty of tooth to get a nice clean color. I think the frog's body is starting to look very nice, except for a few messy details here and there, which I'm trying to fix by putting another layer on top. Sometimes it works, sometimes not so much. I'm going to put a few details with a white pastel first now to see how that works, and maybe even a little bit of this lighter blue. So overall I think I'm happy with these. I'm not going to throw them away. I'm going to continue to draw with them, maybe try some different types of drawings, like landscape, some still life, maybe even a portrait if it's a simpler one. But my impression is that these are not very good if you want precision, not necessarily just because of the shape of the pastel, but also because of, I don't know, because of how messy and sticky they are. That's just my impression. Maybe there are people out there who can produce cleaner drawings with more precision and detail, but I would still prefer something like a colored pencil most of the time if I'm trying to draw something like that. For a drawing like this that needs to be colorful and that doesn't need that much precision, I think these work really well. And I picked a good subject, and I think I adapted well to it by changing the background. And another thing which I think will be very important for me, and I will have to do some more testing, is the fixing. I'll have to look into that a little bit more. Because I want to see if these can be fixed better than soft pastels, and if that is the case, then maybe for some of the landscape drawings these would be a better choice than, or even wildlife sometimes, these would be a better choice than the soft pastels. Sorry. Just trying to be careful here around the legs. I'm going to add some small details to the leaf. I first used a light green, and then I tried to add some shadow areas with some darker green. I'm going to leave the leaf for now, and I'm going to try to refine the appearance of the hind legs. I need to add some more of those darker details to them. Maybe a little bit more shadow as well, but mostly those darker details, spots or whatever they are. Just creating some more or less random shapes because I can't really make out what the exact pattern is, what the exact shapes look like. A little bit of lighter blue here and there. A little bit more black. So the contrast between those darker details or those shadow details and those almost glossy, shiny, lighter details is very important because it helps me capture the appearance of the frog's skin as well as the shape of its body. Later I'm going to need to add some shadow under the frog's body so that it would be it would look like it's a part of the scene. It's casting some shadow onto that leaf because I added the background, and I also have to modify the background in such a way that it looks like the frog belongs there. See, when I stab with white pastel like this, I'm able to get some slightly cleaner marks, but it's not really something that I would feel like doing most of the time. See how easy it is to make a mess. Just gonna go over that with a lighter pencil to see if I can fix it a little bit. And then a nice highlight with a white pastel. You know, this white pastel appears to be one of the most opaque colors in the range, apparently. That's what it looks like. I don't know. Just working my way down this hind leg. And I'm gonna try to define the toes a little bit better now. If the proportions of my cat are a little bit off, I'm not too worried about that. I'm putting some of those veins on the leaf with a lighter green. I played around with a wooden stick first, trying to scratch off a little bit of pastel to see if that would make the application easier, but it wasn't really necessary. I was still able to apply that lighter pastel. I'm also going to make some parts of the leaf here a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit shiny. Adding the shadow side on these legs, and I'm going to have to make the belly area darker as well. I actually used a touch of green to some of those reddish-orange areas, or next to those reddish-orange areas, to create a little bit of a shadow effect with a complementary color. And here and there I'm going back in with a white pastel to add some to add some highlights. Now it's time to add a little bit of shadow under the frog and maybe a little bit more to the left. I added just a touch of black because I know how strong it is, and then went over it with a little bit of darker green. And now I'm just gonna try to blend these two together using a combination of two approaches: layering with a lighter pastel on top of the dark one, and I may even have to use my finger to soften the edges a little bit. And to spread that a bit more evenly. And I think just like that, you see, we have a very nice shadow that's making the whole scene look more three-dimensional. It now feels like the frog feels more three-dimensional. It feels like it's sitting on top of that leaf. Now I gotta continue working on these toes. For the legs and for the toes, I went in with a lighter blue first, and now I'm drawing the darker details. I can always go back and put in a little bit of lighter color, but because these are tiny details, it's not going to be easy to get clean edges and to work with precision. So maybe it's better to have those lighter colors in place, because it's always easier to go from light to dark than it is from dark to light, even when you have a surface and the medium there where you can layer colors in such a way. Some of the shadow areas need to be a little bit darker, so in order to get more contrast, I simply use a black pastel. These are quite a bit messier than soft pastels. With soft pastels, there's a lot of dust flying around. With charcoal too, you just blow it off and it feels like it's not there. With these, they kind of stick to your fingers, they stick or make marks on your desk and everywhere, and they just feel messier. That's what it looks like to me. A bit more shadow under the legs. And here under the toes as well. This is not bad. There are some things that I find a little bit frustrating, but I always have to remind myself that I'm not working in colored pencil. and it's just going to be different. And after all, I'm kind of new to this. I didn't want much of the front leg, the other front leg, to be visible there, just one of the toes. I decided to keep it simple. Because I did change the position of the body ever so slightly in order to fit the background. Dabbing a little bit to soften that shadow. A few more words about fixing that I will look into eventually, but there are a number of options with this. I know there are specific fixatives for oil pastels, or you could use regular fixatives. Either one of those will work better than they work on soft pastels, better in the sense that they won't alter the colors. I don't really know how much they will be able to fix oil pastels, because these never really dry. So I'm afraid there will be some stickiness, or maybe it will be easier to scratch them off or something. I'm just adding some detail to the leaf. I want to make the surface look a bit more 3D. And another interesting option when it comes to fixing is some kind of a varnish or just clear gesso, because I have two brands of clear gesso that I often use as a surface for pastels and colored pencil. And when it dries clear, and it also fixes whatever is underneath it. I've used it as a primer. I used it in between layers when working with colored pencils. So if I were to apply it on top of this, it just wouldn't smudge. It doesn't smudge as much as soft pastels do. So that's another option I have. And I'm just adding some more of these darker details to the surface of the leaf. I don't really need to make it any more detailed than that. Like I said, this one also is a little bit on the impressionistic side, not super detailed. I'm just going to try to add a few more lighter touches with this white pastel. It's good that it's showing up. And maybe clean up the edge here. There are a couple of more of these spots which I missed. Just a little bit more shadow there. And here at the top. Maybe a few lighter spots here and there. Just making the top part a little bit darker. And the belly area should also be a little bit darker too, because that's in the shadow, that's facing down, facing away from the light source. I'll try adding a little bit of reflection here, like that part of the leg is reflecting a bit of that reddish color. Though I just muddied it in the process, I don't really like how it turned out. It can be a little bit difficult to preserve these clean edges when you're working with oil pastels. The precision is not really one of their qualities, I have to say. I could put my signature with a colored pencil here on the right side. It's showing up nicely. This is the finished drawing. Thanks for watching. Check out my other videos, and for longer videos, check out my Patreon. Bye bye.